You're good. Over here.
Yeah,
We're gonna need. Oh yeah, we'll need one more chair.
Okay, so let's move that one down. And we'll grab
Yeah, because we have one there. We just need one more after that.
All right, here. We can put maybe, we can grab one from right around there. This is a,
Yes.
and again,
I don't know why it's not letting, this is only relevant as far as,
thank you so much.
Yep.
as far as whether we are gonna share screens in any way. All right, Pat?
Hello.
Hi, ladies.
Okay, do you have any feedback on color one? Well, LSC webinars, I see. Who's color one?
You
All
are.
right, we're just gonna, okay, I am, all right. So I think we're good, we solved the technical
I
problem.
wish I had your shawl.
Do you want one for my office?
No, it's okay. I'm gonna break up my outfit.
Well, now we're all in here. Okay. Just so everyone knows, this is Kate Bundy. She's an undergrad at Colgate. She's shadowing me today. So
Okay,
she's
Thank you for having me. She'll be exhausted at the end of the day.
you bet.
No.
She's a Colgate?
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah. Buddy of mine worked there.
You work there?
Adam Weinberg,
I totally know that name.
he's the president.
That's why I ring the bell. Was he? That's crazy. Man, not at the frat party you went to.
That's right, yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Mostly I have, like, high friends in low places, but.
Anyway, is Pat on?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm here. I'm just
Can we
waiting for everyone to settle down.
Sorry, hi Pat.
We're assembled.
All right. Okay. So today's meeting is a Agile Debrief. I've wrote something up. I'll actually share my screen. It's not a very long document. It's basically a something to discuss through as I present it. And then just go over and capture some additional notes because I'm sure I probably missed a few things as far as lessons learned and things of that nature. So I've got it down in 4 sections, and the first one is just how did we feel throughout the process on how secure we felt about sharing our how we felt about it. So it started off fairly good and went up higher and dipped a little bit nearing the end, just because I think the apprehension towards the release was starting to show itself. But beyond that, the team was fairly good about having the ability to speak their mind about the entire process. That's my feeling, my sentiments. I don't think there was any time for me that I felt like, okay, there's no one talking about a certain issue. So I felt pretty good about it. I think that's the way everyone else felt about it. I'm not sure. But that's this first piece. Any thoughts on this? You guys still there?
No?
Yeah.
I think anybody has any thoughts.
I thought you were just gonna go through your whole presentation and then we were gonna.
No, not so much. No.
Okay, so then
I want to just
prompt up what you want.
do it as we go through it. Because I didn't spend like a whole day on this. I spent, about an hour just to go through, okay, how did we do? What was this, the lessons learned and things of that nature. So I'll just jump into the next piece, which was I wrote up the effectiveness and proficiencies that we had as a group. So the next section is Agile Process in Jira. I felt it was very strong. The team started on board and finished on board throughout, as in, when we had Scrum meetings, we had, the reviews and the testing. Everything was as per the processes throughout. There was, all the meetings were attended and executed as per the Agile processes with very little deviations. And then when there were deviations, we tried to make them align with the Agile development process as much as possible, such as merging user stories into one sandbox and things of that nature, for the effectiveness of time or time efficiency. We did those things here and there. So that was, the Agile process, very strong in my opinion. going into the version control that we used in Bitbucket and GearSet, there were 4 different elements on what we needed to manage. And those were the Salesforce API, the Salesforce data, Squid pages, and Conga solutions. The Salesforce API was strong at the end once we figured out that the Salesforce API version was an issue. Peter and I can speak to that fairly at length for what we experienced in that domain when the version was figured out as an issue. Now we know exactly what to do in GearSet to manage that so that the Bitbucket source is going to align between all the versions in Bitbucket and all the different orgs from sandbox through to production. The data was another issue that we had some success, but a lot of issues with. It started off okay, moving data from production through to sandboxes and from sandboxes to other sandboxes for testing purposes. It kind of worked, and it started to get a little patchy in its effectiveness. It was better than doing things manually, that's for sure, but it was still somewhat patchy. Especially some relationships between contacts and organizations, they got messed up somehow. But for the purpose of testing, it wasn't problematic because we don't care. Technically, we didn't care which contacts were part of which organizations for testing purposes, but it was noticed that it wasn't 100% accurate. But again, it was only for testing on sandboxes, so it wasn't crucial that it worked 100%.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Are things like this memorialized anywhere so that in like a year, if we need to remember, oh, there was this issue with contacts and organizations and sandboxes, we don't recreate the wheel?
I don't know if it needs to be memorialized just because it's a non-issue when it comes to testing. It doesn't really matter for which contacts belong to which organizations when it comes to testing in a sandbox.
Well, I disagree that it doesn't need to be memorialized. We need to try to make this better. And I don't know when we are next going to embark on a project that uses this high-intensity agile process that we've been in, but not when we do, but at a reasonable time before we do, we need to revisit these problematic parts of the process. And this is definitely one that's problematic. It probably really impacted 5 or 10% of our user stories, but where it did, it set us back in time and we were able to work around it. It wasn't a showstopper, but it's a tool that we're using that either we need to learn to use it better or we need to find a different tool, something. And so that needs to be memorialized in the appropriate place, wherever that may be.
The one thing I'll add too is that contact records are very unique and important kind of information within our Salesforce instance. And so how we manage those contact records will have implications for other Salesforce build-out. If there's going to be grant applications, for example, that are built out in Salesforce, those contract records and having the right contract records are critical. Leveraging Salesforce for communications. If we shift from MailChimp to some other Salesforce app, then those contact records are really important. So they're really an important hub that a lot of folks will extend from.
And the issue we're talking about here does not impact our production records. It impacts the creation of copies or partial copies of production that we use for development purposes. So your points are all very well taken, but that's not an impact.
That's beside the point.
This particular issue.
Okay.
So what's the place to write all of this down?
Oh, you're looking at me for that answer. That's too bad.
Or anyone. I don't know.
But it's, yeah,
Well, I think
I
it's,
think you and I need to discuss this.
Yeah.
And
and I think this is writing down our SDLC and what we use in development.
Yeah.
This is all part of it, and when we have trouble spots like this, we need to memorialize those as trouble spots,
Yeah.
and
it could be right in that document.
Yeah.
You know, we're planning to revisit the document we have because it's been a working document, but we need to turn that into something that we can come back to after a time.
Yeah.
And that really has good details of everything we need to know.
And what we have talked about, Pat and I and Lou talked about was, we have this one last sprint to get through, and then after that, getting the team together for first a meeting to discuss what's written down and what isn't there yet, and then go and more fully write it down.
Yeah, so I just made a note in the software development lifecycle document, which is where I would think if we're going to move forward with SDLC and Agile development to, do a final pass on this document to update it from all the lessons learned, one of which is what I've highlighted here, and I've put a note on. I can pass this document on to you guys to continue with, and I can assist with that, but here's where I would continue with it.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Please pass on, Pat, and I'll schedule a meeting for our team to talk after this sprint.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so the next section was squid pages when it comes to version control. It was straightforward, but it was easy to overwrite / clobber other developers' work since it's the entire page that gets updated, not a portion of it. So I could have done a change in one sandbox to demographics, for example. And Bindu or Peter could have made another change on the demographics as well. And unless we coordinated things to go in serial fashion, one would clobber the other, so they would overwrite the other. So it was just as a team, we had to be aware of when there was more than one user story on one form, so that we would do them in serial versus parallel fashion. So it's just a little bit of heads up on how to manage squid pages, and that was easily managed. It did happen once or twice, but it was fairly easy to go back and fix it. The next one was Conga Solutions. It was an effective solution, just a finicky solution. It took both Alex and I a few attempts to try the way the Conga eMigrator works. And if you miss even the smallest step, it fails. So it's just a matter of following it very much step by step. It's almost as if you have to print out the page for every time you do it and check off each time you do each piece in the process. It's just a finicky process. So
Can I ask a question about Conga?
Mm-hmm.
Did we choose that, or was that chosen for us because it's what Exponent used?
Not sure.
I think it's some of both. I think we chose it initially because it was recommended by Exponent.
Did we ever look for alternatives?
Yes, and I think the conclusions we've come to when we've looked for alternatives is that it's hard to find something better than Conga, unfortunately.
Yes, okay. I would wholeheartedly agree. Even though the migration of the solution is fairly clunky, Conga on its own merits is, in my opinion, the best solution for the task at hand.
Is this too technical of the type of question you get into with Jeff at Salesforce? What are other organizations?
No, I just had a discussion with another group too. Have we ever looked at Drawloop?
I've looked at both. If you want to hear my opinion on the two.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Drawloop is the learning curve is lower, but its effectiveness / strength is also lower. So though you can do a lot more quicker. You can't do as much with as, you have to put a little bit more effort on the Conga side, but then Conga is a lot stronger in what it can bring into pages, what data it can bring to what you have to merge into a page, and how
Okay.
you merge it into a page, and what you can do with the
Okay.
page once you've merged it. And there are ways to make Conga significantly less expensive, or at least the last time I used the Conga workflow, it was significantly less expensive than getting a license for everyone who's going to do a merge. In other words, you can do a merge without having to get that screen that it opens up a screen and then it asks you to click a button, which is like, the user's just got to get used to this weird screen to get to the PDF, and then you get your PDF. Whereas if you use Conga workflow, you can have it go directly as an attachment to the record, an attachment to an email, all sorts of different delivery methods of the attachment, and it's one license that gets used. You might have a minimum license, like minimum number of licenses you have to buy in the first place, but it's 5 or 10 versus one for every executive director and / their second user or third user. I'm not sure. Is it one or two extra users you have after the executive directors?
2
Two.
extra.
Yeah, so they each also have their own Conga, per login or perpetual license.
We actually, we went away from that this year, just so you know. We have a certain amount of events, basically,
Yeah,
on Conga.
it'd be worthwhile to take a look at what that cost is versus the workflow version, where you can get
Okay.
5 perpetual licenses with workflow and see how they stack up against each other. Because that
Got
might factor into your decision to stay with or move away from Conga.
I just think the way we currently use it is completely not user-friendly with the way that you have to sit and wait for it to generate your document.
Yeah, for sure. That part is, you have to wait for it with draw loop as well. Like it's got to get the data, merge the data, produce the document, then you get it. It's not pre-generated because it's live data, right? Data can change at any time, so it's got to be based on live data.
Pat, am I calling that the right kind of app, a document generation?
Document generation,
Is that what-
document merger, email merge, document merge, mail merge.
Okay.
Doc assembly?
Yeah. Conga and draw loop are 1 and 2. There's another couple of them out there, but they start to drop off on, the feature sets. Conga by far is the largest feature set available. Yeah, and then it just goes from there. Draw loop, I think, is the same price as Conga.
It's less money.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hopefully the workflow solution is something that keeps Conga in place, because Conga is definitely the more robust solution. You can just do more with it.
Okay.
So that would end our version control and Bitbucket and gear set. The next thing is fairly short. It's lessons learned. There's only 3 that I put in there. They're pretty significant. The first one is Salesforce API version importance and significance. Basically, everything was running tickety-boo throughout the first 3 or 4 sprints until we started to notice some oddities and some strangeness, and it really put us through a loop as to why it wasn't working, why things weren't merging appropriately, why the diffs were looking so strange, and that was simply because of the API versions. And once that was figured out, things really started to fall into place as to why things were happening and how to move forward. It wasn't a mystery after that. For a little while, it would be, when Peter and I were digging into it, it was a complete mystery. And even a couple times with Bindu and I as well, there was just like we had no explanation as to why they looked so strange. And then the API version cleared everything up. The SDLC as a process isn't a bulletproof solution. As what I mean by that is that even though we have a process that documents what you do and how you do it, it's still prone to user error where I could overwrite a squid page, or I can overwrite an API version, or we as a group can forget that we did something and the metadata that's there is, got a solution that we might overwrite. So it's easy to do that in code review or as an overwrite for a squid page, but it's still it's much better than not having a process to begin with. So it's to say yes to use SDLC. You just still have to be diligent when you're using SDLC. The second one.
Entirely.
What's that?
I say you can't rely entirely on the process.
Correct. Yeah, it's not just follow the process. You got to be actively reviewing what you're doing, even though it's just do the next step, especially in things like code review. The next one is the document itself. It's always going to be changing. So this other tab here, there's still lots of things to update. The walkthroughs especially, even if I update them halfway through, they would be having to be updated again just because of software updates. Is one instance of where it's no longer relevant. Like they moved a button, they may change some tabs in gear set, so the walkthrough is kind of like, well, where's this at? It's not on my screen. Well, they changed the UI, they even changed some of the wording. So things like that have to be reviewed pretty regularly. The whole process has to be reviewed fairly regularly. The document has to be updated due to that, especially in changes in the process in Jira. We can do things, there's still a few things that I could do in there to make the process a little cleaner. Like right now, there's some process automation between when you go from started, when you do development, to testing and back to started. The assignment of who it's assigned to is automated. Those things are not done by Jira alone. That's done with, I forget the name of the tool, but it's automation.
Yeah.
Exact name, but point is like that we can do to update it and make it a little bit better. So it's an ever evolving process and document, basically what I'm saying here.
Yeah, and Pat, on that automation setup specifically, we're going to probably want to get with, since you did that, we're entirely blind to how that was done.
Oh yeah.
So we're going to get with you and review that.
Sure. Yeah, it's the user interface is a little finicky, but once you get past one little bit about it, it's actually a very good user experience. There's only one part that kind of sucks, but the rest is fairly straightforward and easy to read through and understand, and then replicate for other solutions you want to extend with this software.
So the way Pat uses it is software development lifecycle.
Oh.
I often say system development lifecycle, which is it's more encompassing.
Yeah. Yep. And the last section is the sprint velocity, which I'm quite excited to get to, just because it's on a high note. So this started out predictably slow. There were a lot of first-time lessons learned in the first couple of sprints, such as the processes, the softwares, the idiosyncrasies, etc. So just to show this, we have sprint U that was with 24 points versus sprint Y with 86 points, and it just shows with two graphs. So there's this one. So we started on October 11th, and we added a couple story points right here, and then we did something, and they said no, that wasn't right, and we did a few things, and then we rushed to get a few things done, and then on October 23rd, we seemingly got everything done. And then on sprint Y, there was 86 points, and we started off right at the beginning at 86 points, and then we pretty much went down the entire time except for a little blip at the end. So this goes to say that the team, learned the processes and learned agile development, learned SDLC, and became quite proficient throughout. And it shows in this sprint. It's so yeah. There's on the high note that picture right there. And that's it. That's the debrief. Was there expecting any more?
I can add one other thing to this.
Sure.
So this is a very successful project, and I think it's because the team really concentrated on process and everything. However, there was one other part of this that I want to take the opportunity to foot stomp. Having our business partner and the IT people together throughout the whole thing was what I think also made it very productive and very successful. Having Carlos and his team in there with us for planning and looking at all the stories and creating the stories, I think that's what it's going to take us to get a really productive grants management system overall.
Yeah, stepping back from, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Stepping back from the technical to talk more about kind of personnel and process. There's something that I felt was in place here that since I wasn't involved, I can't really speak to it. When we were doing the application development, when Exponent was doing the application development, stuff like that. But we, as a consequence of the data users group, had very clear requirements and we knew what we were building. If we had not had that process, then it would have made the product owner role a lot more difficult. I mean, I could have spit out some things that I thought made sense for redesigning the GAR, but they would have been coming from between my ears. So that process took place over the entire summer. And so we had very specific, tangible things that we needed to redesign. And what we did, not to poo-poo your two graphs here, Pat, but we front-loaded the development with in addition to the learning that was going on, we front-loaded the development with some of the more challenging things, recognizing that if we didn't get all the way through all of these user stories, that some of the less challenging and perhaps less weighty things would be at the tail end, and we might be able to push them to the next year. So, but again, you can't prioritize like that at the front end unless you have a full set of requirements.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but having been involved from the beginning, I think it's sort of apples and oranges because we did not engage in a fully agile process. We had requirements out the wazoo. It was, I think, the fact that the entire thing was so mishandled from the beginning that I don't think it's really, I think our lesson learned coming out of the fiasco of the grants management system was that we didn't do agile appropriately. We didn't engage the product owner enough. We didn't understand what MVP was. We had a lot of people working hard, but to what end? And so I think that the lesson learned from that, again, informed greatly what you're saying, but as we've been talking with Jada, it is also, what is that process? What do we want that process to be? Because in the end, what we got was a cut and paste of an existing process just in Salesforce, and that's not what we wanted.
Got it.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
This is Maru. I moved to my office to be less disruptive with my cough. I second what Lynn is saying. I think I felt I was involved in both sides. as a non-developer, and so on both iterations. And I think that Agile, as tedious as it might seem, as controlling as it might seem, it does provide some really strong communication channels, engagement protocols, and tools, tracking tools, that honestly enable being able to make decisions that need to be made at just the right time. That was not there before at all, that I could see anyways. I wasn't fully engaged in whatever process was being done before, but it certainly wasn't classic Agile or Scrum Agile like Pat carried us through. So I think having something in place that allows troubleshooting along the way, whether it's missing information, communication, prioritization, product desires, whether they're from a data user group or from a product owner, having those tools in place make the team more effective and definitely more productive. I'll let Bindu and Peter speak to that, but I accomplished a boatload of work that I don't think we would have done without the process in place.
Yeah, I think the mandatory, the enforced communication actually ends up being a good thing, because there is there's a better defined path to follow when things get hard. Okay, so we estimated that we could do a thing this way in this much time. Turns out this way doesn't work, so we got to do it some other way that's a lot harder. The way, the less formal way we've done work here before, that's a much harder communication to bring about and to get to an effective solution. I think the fact that we are all together in a room with an agenda every week, 2 weeks, day, depending on what the meeting is, and the fact that the design of those meetings really covers seemingly everything we need to cover, gives us a time and a place to discuss the hard topics that people maybe don't want to discuss.
Yeah, I think that, just to add to that, I think that this felt like more of a team effort than most of the projects I've been on in the last 2 years.
Yes.
And I mean that quite deliberately. We had, there were certain things that, Peter said, yeah, I know you'd like that, but, you can't get it. And I respect it. And pushed back and sometimes said, well, I want it this flavor then, if I can't get it that flavor.
You even called him a couple names. Come on, Carlos.
Yeah, sure, yeah. Well, but trust is the grease that, that you need in order to push projects through. And I trusted that he was giving me the straight dope, and he trusted that the priorities that we were setting were meaningful and didn't second judge them.
And I think too.
I'm thinking, Peter, what do you say?
Okay.
I was going to say that there were several artifacts that starting off I thought were potentially bogus, but they weren't. There's a science behind this, and it's been backed up for almost 10 years now since the Agile Manifesto was first put out on the software, sector, software development sector. So, and now many other sectors are adopting it too for producing other things. But the story points, I could not wrap my head around them at first. But man, they were totally valuable. And the fact that that's a democratic voting process is what really makes it makes you get to the finish line. And I think a lot of it has to do with the story points, that everybody has to discuss and understand each other's point of view. What is the saying? Before you're understood, you have to understand others. That's really what the user point voting process is all about. Why do you have a 13 when I think it's a 2? That's the constant fight on a daily basis when there's no agile process. I think you should do that faster. I think it just takes a minute. I think, where you're like, oh my God, no, it doesn't. And you've never done my job, therefore you don't know. And this is a way where nobody has to be an expert. The cross functionality is in the room, and there is a process called user points, and voting that allows everyone to very professionally and effectively have that discussion.
This is the most touchy-feely meeting I've had in 6 years.
I stopped, I'm done.
Management mechanisms, I don't see it as touchy-feely at all. I see it as operationalizing work.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
Thank
So do
you.
you think for the future then, going forward, do you all envision, before we go on to the next part of the GMS, whatever that may look like, talking about, are we going to follow this exact process? Are there ways to speed it up? I mean, is there going to be an opportunity? I don't think we're going to do that today, but certainly I think we did this to the agile to the 10th degree, following everything by the book. I imagine there are efficiencies that can be built in.
Yeah. My impression of this process, and I'm not in management, but my impression of this process is that the level of effort and the level of allocation of people and resources to this project might not be sustainable over a longer project in this organization.
Right.
So we would have to figure out how to do, I mean, none of us, even we as developers, weren't 100% on this project, but we were pretty close, and we were under orders that, these meetings supersede your other meeters. And if we're on a 2-year project, I don't think we can do that. I don't know what the solution is there, but that's got to be a part of the discussion, let alone the technical aspects of how we can possibly structure the delivery of a thing so that we're, rebuilding the car while we're still driving the car. Yeah, so there's a lot of things to talk about.
Yeah.
This was, I wouldn't call it all hands on deck, but it was 1 or 2 steps below that, and it was high intensity.
I think also that was Helen speaking, right? I think the reason the conversation is important moving forward is because I think there's a bit of a culture blending that can be done. The 2-week cycle, and Pat, you can kill me if you want, the 2-week cycle is not a Bible. It really isn't. It works because there's 52 weeks in a year, and none of us are going to create a 53rd, but it could be 3 weeks. And with a teleworking environment, with compressed work schedules, I don't think the 2 weeks really works for us. I think we need a different sprint. The sprint size has to be culturally, the number of points and the sprint size, the sprint length have to be adjusted to fit our culture. But it doesn't mean throw out the baby with the bathwater. What do you think, Pat?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've seen 1 week, I've seen 2, I've seen 4. As much as you could go as much as 8 weeks, but the norm is between 2 and 4. 3 is totally fine. It does cut down on the longer meetings. You do have to then hold some of those meetings longer, like the backlog refinement and the sprint. Oh God. But those meetings are, we're getting much faster to begin with in the first place. Like at first it was like a full day, and then it was, 4 hours, and then it was like getting close to like 2 hours. So, you're getting through them much faster anyway. So it would make sense to me to go to 3 or 4 weeks anyway. So then you don't have as many meetings to go through.
Well, that's a lot of food for thought. We got a big development thing coming up. Don't you, Jada?
No, we do.
We do, that's right.
There you go.
What's really, without Carlos and his team, this
Right, no, we
would
are
not have
the,
happened.
but I think, yeah.
All right, we like success stories.
Mhm.
Thumbs up. And we have one more sprint going, and then we have a sprint review, and that will be the last sprint review of this GAR 2017. And then we will fix any issues, not in sprints, but in, what's it called?
Kanban.
Kanban. So that they're accurately documented and we can have success with those too.
Mm-hmm.
And Pat, thank you for leading us down the trail. Thank you
Oh,
so
Yeah,
much.
well done.
It was a bit of a perfect storm to have me walk into. So, honestly, like, you guys were ready for it. You guys had done a lot of the legwork up front with the user group, and you didn't want to experience the same thing again. So, you guys were really, really ready for it.
Okay.
All
All right.
Have a good day, Pat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.